Just going to kickstart the process. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us virtually today. We're very pleased to welcome you and welcome those those of you who have been with us for a very long time, and those of you now who are just fairly new to the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Organization. Colleagues, my name is Maher Ezzeddine. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of an idea innovator company, a global idea innovator company by the name of Idea & Co, and currently the chairman of the board for the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Organization. Today marks our 7th anniversary since the inception of the actual organization itself at HBS. This is when we first started. Also today, under the circumstances, as we were talking just right now, under the COVID-19 circumstances, we're very proud to be able to host our first virtual global networking night here at Harvard University, with all of you joining us from across the globe. So thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. We have an excellent program for you today with distinguished panelists working in the field of aviation and space exploration. They're here to talk to us about their experience related to COVID-19, but also to see what's happening in the future of space exploration and aviation from transformation perspective. But before we get started, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to the board members, our board, who made this a success, in particular to those who helped us really truly make this whole event come together to become a success. So we have Deborah McClay with us. She's based in Florida. She's responsible for the programming committee, and she'll be leading the effort on the next session. We also have Sergey with us. He's based in Eastern Europe. He's joining us from the Ukraine, and he's responsible for the membership committee. We also have a couple of members based in California. We've got Hunter and Logan. Hunter is responsible for the sponsorship committee and Logan for the communication committee. Also, we have Richard Rose, who will be joining us hopefully shortly. He's based in Florida, and he's responsible for the finance and the audit committee. So really, we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. In today's virtual gathering, I'd like to brief you about our strategic roadmap as the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Organization. All of you have subscribed to our LinkedIn group due to a mutual passion for exploration in space exploration and aviation, hence your presence with us today. I truly believe that your passion for aerospace helps us unite, and it's such a powerful word in today's age, to be united together. And the energy we create is what allows us to achieve our individual and organizational goals and objectives. So we need you as much as you need us, and that's why we're grateful to have you joining us virtually at the Aerospace Global Networking Night at Harvard University. United we are, and we also thank you for being with us. So I just want to give you a quick brief about our program. What is it that we're doing at the Aerospace Association? We've been in business for over 7 years now. And during the next 5 months, you'll be learning about different initiatives through our hybrid planned activities, seminars, webinars, and special events in collaboration with prominent organizers, event organizers worldwide. One of the key pillars and objectives of the organization itself, is to attract talent, and to attract talent to Harvard University. And to do so, I truly believe, and the rest of the board, we believe that inspiration plays a key role, hence the formation of strategic partnerships for special projects. Special projects related to the Red Planet, special projects related to intuitive drones, to eco-friendly aviation, to nanosatellites, to the future of mobility. to creating the jobs of the future in aerospace, where you will be able to join in and get some sort of hands-on experience, either as a mentor, as a coach, or some sort of an advisory role that you can play a key part in getting some sort of a knowledge transfer to those who are being inspired by us. And we want to take them to Harvard University and truly to change the world based on that. All such activities will be posted hopefully in the next upcoming months on our upcoming online network platform, which is work in progress right now. And we hope really, this is our goal, is to get it up and running in the next few months. This is truly our goal. We will keep you posted on the official launch date of our smart online social portal. I'd love to go further and further, but I don't want to take too much of your time. I need to leave room for Deborah, basically, to introduce herself and fill you in on our next session. Also introduce our distinguished guests, the panelists. If you have any question, suggestion, collaboration that you want to talk about, or you just want to say hi, I'm here. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat room. Thank you very much for listening. And with that, I'll let you welcome Deborah McClay to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. I'm pleased to be here, and I am also an international airline captain and a professor of aviation, and I'm proud to be a part of the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Association. And with that, we would like to welcome you to our program. We're very excited about our guests this afternoon, and we have just a few housekeeping to let you know. We will be following the moderated session with a Q&A, so please post your questions for our speakers in the Q&A, and we will have those at the end of the moderated session. And with that, we are pleased to introduce our two guests today. And I have a short bio, and then I will let them also tell you a little bit about their involvement in the aviation sector and the aerospace sector. Our first guest speaker is Mr. Frank White. He's a space philosopher and an author. Mr. White has authored or co-authored numerous books on topics ranging from space exploration to climate change to artificial intelligence. His best-known work, The Overview Effect, Space Exploration and Human Evolution, is considered to be by many a seminal work in the field of space exploration. He also had a film called Overview, which was based largely on his work, and it had nearly 8 million plays. Since his first edition of the book on the subject was published in 1987, the overview effect has just become a standard term describing the spaceflight experience. On his book on this topic, The Cosmo Hypothesis, Implications of the Overview Effect, he asked the fundamental question: what is the purpose of human space exploration? And we are very interested in finding out more about this today. Why has the evolutionary process brought humanity to the brink of becoming a spacefaring species? We would like to know all these answers, and we're very excited to speak to Frank this afternoon about this. He also would like to engage us all in becoming citizens of the universe today. So thank you, Frank, for being here with us today. We appreciate it. And our second guest speaker this afternoon will be Captain Houston Mills. Houston is the Vice President of Flight Operations for United Parcel Service Airlines, or UPS Airlines. Captain Mills is a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. He served in operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and he also flew in the operations Restore Hope and Southern Watch. He's from Indianapolis, Indiana, and he received his bachelor's degree from Wabash College and an MBA from Webster University. Captain Mills has flown more than 100 aircraft carrier landings, and he also joined UPS in 1994 as a DC-8 flight engineer. He was soon promoted into management 6 years later and has held positions with increasing responsibility throughout his tenure, from human resources to flight training, flight standards, and flight operations. As a flight qualified management captain, Houston has also included positions as flight training division manager, international chief pilot, and director of airline safety. Most recently, Captain Mills has been on assignment to public affairs in the global aviation strategy and public policy. In 2019, Captain Mills was promoted to Vice President of Flight Operations at UPS Airlines. He will oversee the flight and safety related operations of UPS Airlines while representing UPS in international aviation organizations. And also, most recently, Captain Mills had the honor of delivering the first COVID vaccines into Louisville, Kentucky on December 13, 2020. So welcome, Captain Mills. We're pleased to have you here also and look forward to hearing about the many exciting innovations and areas UPS is working on. With that, since both of our speakers' topics involve making connections, I would just like to ask both of you if you can take a few moments and just give us a short description of what inspired you to get into this field. This will give us a little insight before we start our panel discussions. Thank you.
Houston?
Oh, well, thank you, Frank, and Debbie, thank you, and thanks to the Harvard Aerospace Alumni organization for this great opportunity to be here with you. I certainly don't feel worthy with all these significant brain cells on this particular Zoom, but I'm very thankful for this opportunity. To your question, Debbie, really when I think about aviation, I was actually an English literature major, political science minor, with the intent on going to Michigan Law School once I graduated from Wabash College. And a Marine recruiter ran up upon me when I was working out and played basketball at Wabash and said, "Hey, what do you plan to do after undergrad?" And I says, "Well, I'm going to law school." He says, "Well, how are you going to pay for it?" I said, "I don't know." He says, "Well, let me tell you about this program called the Judge Advocate Program in the Marine Corps." And it was through the Officer Candidate Program that I went to become a lawyer, where I saw my first aviation air show. And so when I got back, I told my recruiter, I says, "Hey, I didn't know the difference between a rudder and aileron my junior year of college." And I says, "But I want to fly." He says, "Well, you got to take this ASVAB test. Very practical. I was always good in math, science, and everything else." So I took the test, did well. And next thing I know, I was in flight school. And a couple years later, I was flying the F-18. So very blessed, just a product of a lot of hard work, a lot of great mentors. And now I just, truly love, flying. It's not a day I come to work where I don't pinch myself and say, "Hey, I can't believe I get paid to do this." I get to meet some of the most phenomenal people throughout the world. I've traveled all over the world, and every day I have the opportunity to influence others for ongoing success in this great industry. So an honor to be here with you today and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Houston. We appreciate it. And Frank, would like to hear a little bit about how you got started.
Well, I love hearing that kind of story, Houston, where you have one direction and then you go in another direction, and then because that's pretty much how my life has been. I'll just tell you, my first cousin who I grew up with in Mississippi honestly says that when we were 5 years old, I said to her, "Anne, you understand we can't stay on this earth forever. We're going to have to go to other planets and live there. Planets don't last forever, Now, I don't remember that, but I take it as it's a great legend. I do know that my mother gave me a book called Stars when I was 10 years old, and it blew my mind. And, the beginning was really astronomy. And from there, it's natural to go to, space exploration. Once again, I never lost interest in space of any kind, whether it's exploration or astronomy. And I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. That was my idea. That was when I had a plan. And like you, a big attraction was that they were going to pay me while I was there. It wasn't going to cost anything. But I was required to go see my guidance counselor as a senior. And she said to me, "Frank, you must apply to Harvard. You will love it there." And I said, "No, I'm not, too expensive. I've got another plan." But anyway, her son had gone to Harvard and she forced me to apply. So I had to choose actually between Harvard and the Air Force Academy, and it's the kind of problem you like to have. But in the end, I chose Harvard because it didn't have a math requirement. And it was all about politics, social science. President Kennedy had just taken office. It was a hotbed of government activity. And that spoke to my, my interests more. Perhaps I would have become a pilot if I'd gone the other way. I don't know. But I'm impressed, because it's not a skill I have. And of course, I meet a lot of astronauts in my work, and many of them are pilots. They've flown the shuttle and other spacecraft. And I'm totally intimidated by them. I just write down what they say and publish it. That's what I do. But anyway, it's turned out that my Harvard education has been extremely useful because what I'm about is writing about space. And, it's one thing I learned at Harvard was how to write.
Excellent.
Great. Well, thank you both for that short introduction. And we're excited to get started with the panel. We have some questions for both of you. And as we said, following the session, we'll start the Q&A from our audience. So Captain Mills, just to start us off here, we've had quite an exciting year. As we had said in your bio, you were able to deliver the first COVID vaccines. And I know 2020 was a difficult year for many all around the world with the global pandemic. But it is exciting news that the vaccine has come out. Can you tell us a little bit about the behind the scenes logistics of how we get the vaccines from the manufacturers and move them through the UPS system?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're very excited, first of all, to be part of this public-private partnership with the Operation Warp Speed, which is really the key to this distribution. But if I could maybe go back just a little bit, when the pandemic, really kind of broke out, back in February, March, we, UPS, began working with FEMA, and in particular, Operation Airbridge, which was really focused on ensuring that PPE and personal protective equipment was shipped around the world. So we started way back in February, leveraging our skill sets. We're very uniquely positioned, delivered over 24 million pounds of PPE around the world, just working to get things prepared. As we saw the vaccine process materializing, we also invested in some cold storage facilities, both here in Louisville and also in the Netherlands. These core storage facilities, particularly when you got vaccines like the Pfizer vaccine, which needs to be stored in very cold temperatures, have tremendous capability, upwards to minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit storage capability. So in addition to that, we worked with the National Stockpile Program to really open up our facilities so we could leverage that use as well. So as we kind of fast forward over the next several months, we're in the clinical trial process with both Pfizer as well as Moderna. We're actually also participating in 8 of the 10 leading vaccine manufacturers in the world. We're still participating in their clinical trials. So we've been very intentional in ensuring that we could leverage our tremendous capability. Now, on any given day, we operate in over 220 countries around the world. So we were really built for this moment. We've invested a lot in healthcare. Every day we deliver about 50,000 life-saving medicines around the world, millions of square feet of storage capability. And so when the first vaccine rolled out, we were quite honored to be there. This particular Pfizer vaccine that happened back there on December 13th rolled out of their Kalamazoo, Michigan plant, and then was transported on the ground under U.S. Marshal escort to Lansing, Michigan, where myself and First Officer Neil Newell had the honor of being the first pilots in the United States that carried the first vaccines. There's a couple things I remember about that flight. It was something special, obviously, because it was the first one. We were only carrying the vaccines, but when the vaccines came into the facility, there was just so much extra attention that was taking place. There was an energy there that I had never seen before in our operation. And as Neil and I went out to the plane, we were taken aback that as we were about to push off, we saw over about 100 people come outside the building with the U.S. Marshals, and they just watched us as we taxied, and they just all began to clap. And it was at that moment that I realized that this moment was way bigger than any of us, because really what that moment represented was the beginning, of the end. Neil, my co-pilot, was an Air Force veteran. Frank, Air Force Academy guy, flew F-16s. I had the privilege of flying F-18s, so you had two fighter guys, flying the first vaccine flights, and both of us being service before self type of folks, mission oriented. So it's quite an honor for us to come in and really, make that delivery. From a flight perspective, it was routine. I mean, it's what we do. But when we bought those vaccines in, they actually came into Louisville, Kentucky, home of our WorldPort, our all points hub. So things that come in Louisville can literally be distributed anywhere in the world within the next 24 hours. And as you know, Debbie, as a captain here at UPS operating all over the world, we've just got that tremendous capability. So, we're very proud and to be part of the moment. It's an ongoing activity. I'm happy to say that since the vaccines have rolled out, we've got over close to 99% on-time delivery. And even with the ice storm, the nor'easter, that took place right before our peak season, we're very quickly able to recover. Every vaccine shipment itself has some proprietary technology in it, which helps collect data. It's got GPS tracking. So it allows us to very closely coordinate with our team. We actually stood up a tower, a healthcare tower, which monitors every vaccine shipment in our network 24 hours a day. So there's a lot of great collaboration. Although I'm connected to the airline, we've got tremendous ground capability. We've got oceanic capability. And then of course we've got all the warehousing capability, as I mentioned earlier. So our ability to bring all this together in this public-private partnership with Operation Warp Speed really did set us up for success. Our founder, if I could, I'll turn it back over to you, but our founder, Jim Casey, who founded UPS back in 1907, was a very humble man. He had a $100 loan. He bought 2 bicycles and discovered the American Messenger Company. They were delivering telegrams. And today we're 500,000 plus UPSers strong, operating one of the largest logistics companies in the world. And as I mentioned that day, I know Mr. Casey was smiling back as we were able to execute this first of many, vaccine execution safely, because it really is a combination. We were just one piece of the process. The scientists, the doctors, the first responders, the governments, you got all these entities who come together. And there's one other thing that Mr. Casey said that sticks to me to this day, and that is determined people working together can accomplish anything. If there's one thing this pandemic has proven, it's going to take all of us, collectively around the world to really bring this pandemic to its knees. I like to say I had the privilege of serving our country, in the first Gulf War and a couple of operations, but this battle against COVID is a unique type of battle for humanity. And Frank, to your point about looking at other planets, is another example of this place might not be around forever. So we do need to be thinking about other things. So we're quite honored, Debbie, to be part of this first and our ongoing support of Warp Speed, and really doing all we can to ensure that we're absolutely successful as a country and around the world.
Thank you, Houston. Well, that was very exciting. And like you say, it takes a team to build a village and come together. So I'm sure we're all very proud to be a part of that. So thank you. And as we were just speaking about looking at things from a different angle, let's take us outside of our Earth for a little bit and ask Frank his opinion about the overview effect. You've called this a theory. In what sense is it a theory rather than a phrase or an experience? And can you describe this a little bit more in detail for us, Frank?
Yeah, sure. I want to thank Houston for what you're doing. One of the things that inspires me about space exploration is watching people coming together to do something that's really hard to do, but which is advancing humanity's future. And that's what you all are doing. And one of the things astronauts say to me over and over again is, I say, what did you get out of being an astronaut? And they said, well, as I looked back at the Earth and saw it's a whole system, everything is connected, I realized we're all in this together, no matter how different we are, no matter how our opinions differ. And I've heard a lot of people saying that since the pandemic started, and that's really astronaut awareness, you know. We're all in this together, but when we work together, we can do anything, and we can achieve what appears to be impossible. But that's a lot of what the overview effect is about, Deborah. And I should probably back up before talking about the theory and talk about what the overview effect is. Essentially, it all began for me going back to the story I was telling earlier. Astronaut training would have been an obvious step from the Air Force Academy, but it wasn't very obvious graduating from Harvard with a social science degree in 1966. NASA was not advertising for people who were experts on international relations or government to be astronauts or to be part of the space program. So I eventually found the Space Studies Institute, which was founded by Professor Gerard O'Neill from Princeton. They welcomed everybody because what they were thinking about was people living in outer space and communities in outer space. And so, you know, you're going to have scientists, you're going to have engineers, you're going to have poets, you're going to have doctors, you're going to have all kinds of people. And so they welcomed me, and I started thinking, what would it be like to live in outer space and look at the Earth from a distance all the time, every day? I was thinking about it all the time, and I was flying cross country and looking out the window, and I had an epiphany, you might say. It just came into my mind. Everybody living permanently in outer space would have an overview. They would see the Earth from a distance. They would see that it's interconnected. There are no borders or boundaries. And it's what we struggle to understand living on the surface because we don't see it. We see the universe the way our ancestors saw it 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. It hasn't changed. You know, the Earth is a stable platform. The heavens rotate above us. What the astronauts see is that we truly are on a spaceship, and we're actually moving through the universe at a very high rate of speed. So I had this insight, and then I thought, okay, this is what I was trained to do. I've got to interview all the astronauts. I got to have a big database to prove. I mean, this was my hypothesis. This goes back to the theory. My hypothesis, being a good Harvard trained person, was this is how space settlers would think. There were no people living in outer space, so I thought I'd interview astronauts. They're the closest thing to hand. So I called the NASA Public Affairs Office. I said, I have to interview all the astronauts right away. And the guy at the other end of the line thought that was very funny. He informed me the astronauts were quite busy. This was, you know, I guess, when was this? The early 80s. They were doing things. He said, why don't you interview retired astronauts? We don't control them. And if you come to Houston on your own nickel, I'll give you 2 active astronauts. So I did what he said, and I had 16 interviews as my data for the theory. And that was the first edition of the book. And then for each edition of my book, I've added more interviews. So now it's up to 41. And, you know, the reason I want to think of it as a theory is that it really is a theory about space exploration. And, you know, it can change as we get more information. And that's why I keep interviewing people, because the more people I talk to, the more, you know, the more we know. And just to conclude, it actually is a phrase. And one of the things I'm really grateful for is I wanted to come up with a term, and I didn't have to sit and think about it. It came to me. Everybody can use this term to talk about spaceflight. And you know what? Just about everybody does. It's become a very popular single phrase for describing something. And if you say the overview effect, a lot of people know what it means. You don't have to go on and on about it. And then the other thing, it is an experience, and that's really important. It is the astronaut experience, and it's hard to communicate it. That's one barrier to the spreading of this idea, is that it isn't just a concept. We're really describing something that only about 550 people have experienced. So as we go through tonight, we can talk more about, well, what are we going to do about that? But, you know, it is a theory, it is a phrase, it is an experience, but I think it's important to think of it as something organic and growing, and something that can change over time.
Interesting about how it developed, but do you feel that your education at Harvard played a part in this, your development of the theory? And if you can tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, I did social studies at Harvard, which was at the time a very leading edge interdisciplinary course. You didn't become an economist, you didn't become a sociologist, you didn't become a historian. We moved around into all of those disciplines. And I think that was important because it gave me a willingness to not worry too much about borders and boundaries within the academic. You know, is kind of, it was a very experimental course at the time. And I think it taught me to be bold in my thinking. Harvard taught me to think and to defend my ideas too. I mean, that was very important to me. And anybody who's spent time at Harvard knows you have to be able to articulate your ideas, defend them, elaborate on them. I learned to write well, I think, or at least to get a lot of words on the page. And, you know, the other thing is the idea that I mentioned before of having a concept and then having data to back it up. Now, one thing I want to say, and then I'll close, but I do not call myself a space social scientist, which is kind of a mouthful. I call myself a space philosopher. And the reason is that when the Challenger accident happened in 1986, there was a television program with David Brinkley, and they had Isaac Asimov on there, and they had Tom Wolfe, who wrote The Right Stuff, and George Will. And George Will said, Mr. Wolfe, haven't we had a rather banal explanation for space exploration, non-stick frying pans and tang and so on? And Tom Wolfe said, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. We've never had a philosophy of space. And I said, okay, you're right. You've never had a philosophy of space. So I'll have to develop one. Again, you know, that's kind of how I was taught. Well, if nobody's doing it, you go do it. But I just say one final thing. One very strong image that I took away from Harvard was Plato's Republic. And he described people living in a cave, and they stare at a wall. They have a fire, they stare at a wall, and people make shadows on the cave wall like this, and they interpret what the shadows mean, and they have this very limited worldview, and they debate about it. And one person turns around and walks into the real world, and he sees the world as it really is. And he comes back and tries to explain it to them, and they think he's completely insane. And Plato said he will be fortunate if they don't kill him, because they're so offended by his ideas. And I use that image to say, this is what's going on with the astronauts. Not that anyone has ever been so offended they would kill an astronaut, thank goodness, but we haven't had that experience, and we see it this way, and we can't quite imagine what they're talking about. And that's my job. My job is to help you understand this message that they got. They risked their lives to get this message, and we really need to hear what they're telling us. So that all came from Harvard. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I owe a lot to Harvard, and certainly it had a big impact on my work, and still does.
Thank you. And again, that's very interesting to be able to hear the evolution of how this developed. And when we talk about based on our previous experiences, Houston, I wanted to ask you, with your military background and all the various leadership roles you've held at UPS, how has your background with the military, your education, as you had said earlier, your path has kind of changed and evolved? And I think that's true for a lot of people. Sometimes we set out on one path and we end up taking a much different path. I'd like to hear about your experiences and how you think these leadership roles at UPS and your past experiences have helped with that, and especially with things that are unprecedented, as you spoke about the global pandemic and the vaccine, because I know years ago we would never have thought any of this would have taken place. So if you can elaborate on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Debbie. Yeah, it's interesting. Very similar to Frank. I went to a small private college called Wabash, which is all men, all male. And so liberal arts, only 800 students, 12-to-1 student-teacher ratio. And one of the things that was very important to us for Wabash men is to think critically. And so as Frank, kind of talked about that, this ability to learn, to be a lifelong learner, and to look at things from multiple perspectives. As you know, Debbie, being a pilot, having good situational awareness, being able to see the world in a very dynamic, multi-dimensional way, really helps to be successful when you aviate. And so there's this whole concept of thinking critically, living humanely, and making an impact was really some of the core values that were, part of, my undergrad experience. And quite frankly, they've played out very succinctly as I transitioned into the Marine Corps, where those same core values were very congruent and very aligned. And so that leadership foundation, quite frankly, has paved the way for to see things differently. Interestingly, I had the unique privilege during the first Gulf War. I was on the ground, so I was an F-18 fighter pilot who was asked on a one-year ground assignment. And it just so happened 3 months into that assignment, the first Gulf War broke out. And as a result of that, I went over on the ground. Well, my battalion commander during the first Gulf War happened to be a gentleman named Lieutenant Colonel Jim Mattis, who later went on to become, Secretary of Defense and a great mentor and sponsor. And so I had the honor to see exceptional leadership, doing a very intense experience, right up front. And so I saw what good looks like at a very young age. And so I've always had this whole concept of service before self, servant leadership, looking forward. And then quite frankly, it lines right up with the UPS perspective, because our purpose, interestingly, isn't just delivering packages. Our purpose is to move the world forward by delivering what matters most. And so every day I come to work inspired from that perspective, knowing that I'm part of this 500,000 plus team, who's working together to make a difference in the lives of others. Sometimes that's getting that new TV so I can watch a game. Other times it's getting a vaccine, that could save a life. And so you never know. We treat every package as a customer, but this whole concept of working together with purpose, to see things differently, is what it's about. It's interesting. This COVID environment in particular has brought up some significant challenges, many of which just because operate. And every day we have to get people to comply with the CDC and the WHO and all these guidelines. You hear every day about passengers getting very rambunctious because they don't want to put their mask on. And quite frankly, it's a change. So it takes inspired leadership to get people to understand that it's not what they're doing for themselves; it's they're protecting others in the process. So how do you convey those messages? And then how do you set up venues? We've got multiple testing venues that we set up for our employees so that they can proactively protect themselves. And oh, by the way, if they do get sick, that we as an organization have said, hey, we're going to pay protect you, so you don't have to worry about coming to work sick and infecting others because you're worried about your mortgage payment or paying for food. So from a leadership perspective, working with partners who understand that piece, that we're taking care of each other while we're moving things forward, is just, very, very important. So, cleaning protocols, you name it, logistics, all that work, all kind of connects back to this leadership piece, and I think ultimately where it's going to go when we talk about the COVID in particular, as we move towards this concept of a vaccine pass, and that's kind of the next phase. And some of you probably heard about it. Right now, if our crews operate into Hong Kong, into China, in Australia, many places we go to require folks to have a pre-COVID test, a negative test before they arrive, and we're moving world commerce around the world. And so this COVID pass, once folks are able to get that second vaccine, eventually it'll be like a passport. It's going to allow people to move across countries, cross borders seamlessly, and keep the world moving. I mean, we at UPS, deliver close to 3% of the world's GDP, and so we move a lot of stuff. So our ability to move things, without being encumbered through a lot of patchwork policies from different countries are very important. We certainly understand the need for countries to protect their populace and everything else, but the commerce still has to move. And so this vaccine pass that'll eventually come out, as essential workers, which we're considered to be part of, will certainly help us do that, so we can keep those medicines and life-saving vaccines moving throughout the world. So I know that's kind of a roundabout way from a leadership perspective, but I think all that kind of goes all the way back to this whole concept of being part of something bigger than ourselves and leveraging the strengths of many others, recognizing it's not one person that leads to success. You really have to lean into to gain that overlooked perspective, if you will, overview perspective. We like to say, Frank, and from Pi's world, we take the 35,000 foot view. It's not out of the world, but once you get up to 35,000 foot, it does give you a much broader perspective. And that's the perspective we try to bring into the service, and from a leadership perspective as well, knowing that we've got a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds going through a lot of different things. So how do you connect people, inspire people to move with you versus pushing against you? And so that's one of the leadership perspectives I've tried to incorporate as part of my thinking critically, living humanely, and trying to make a difference in the world.
Thank you very much, Houston. And as you said, everything is for the greater good. And it sounds everything UPS is doing, especially with the pandemic and moving everything forward, is definitely for the greater good. And Frank, based on that, the greater good, what does it mean to bring the overview effect down to earth? How can we translate this and use it for the greater good to help people?
Yeah. Well, as I've done this work, and now there are other people who are interviewing astronauts who have thought, yeah, that sounds interesting. So we're getting more and more of a sense of what that experience is. And what I think we're finding is, or let's put it this way, almost anybody who gets into this work naturally sees, wouldn't it be good if everyone had astronaut awareness? Wouldn't it be good if everyone saw the Earth in this way and understood the connectedness? And as most recently, I interviewed 3 astronauts on the International Space Station down at Johnson Space Center. That was quite a milestone for me. And one of them said, when we talked about what do you get out of being there, it's that no matter how different someone else is from me, we're all human. And they keep repeating this. And I feel like in an age of political polarization, it becomes obvious to anyone looking at this work that the astronauts have gone through an experience where they see what's common, what's unifying. And it's from an experience. They're not sitting around at Harvard thinking, they got it from being there. And Houston talked about how airline pilots get some of it too. So there is actually a worldwide movement, I think I can say, of people interested in how do we give as much of this experience as we can to those of us who are perhaps never going into orbit and are probably always going to be on the surface of the Earth. One of the most obvious breakthroughs that's happening is that Jeff Bezos, Sir Richard Branson, Elon Musk, other private enterprise individuals are doing everything they can to actually take people into suborbital flight and eventually orbital flight and eventually more than that. So that will be the experience when it happens. And then the other big thing that's going on is virtual reality. There are several experiments going on right now where people are trying to use imagery from space with VR to give the experience as much as they can of what an astronaut feels or sees. And you know, my view of this is there are enough people trying it that it'll work. And obviously, it's a much more efficient way to transmit something like the astronaut experience than actually going into orbit, although I support that too. You know, you're not going to have the entire experience. You're not going to be weightless, for example, which I think is a big part of what the astronauts feel when they're there. But there is a company called Space VR that is actually working with flotation tank owners, and you go into the flotation tank and put on the headset. And I haven't done it yet, but it's intended to simulate weightlessness. And I think if I could say what we're trying to do, and I say we because I'm part of this, we are trying to replicate the shift in worldview astronauts have globally. We want it to be a societal shift in awareness. And I have said, and I will say today, I think the overview effect should be seen as a human right. That is, everyone should have the right to experience it because it's the truth of where we are and who we are in the universe. We're not on a stable platform. We're not really, I mean, you look at the Earth from a distance, there are no countries. I'm sorry, that's in our minds. Countries are very useful governing units. I don't want to get rid of countries. I'm not saying that. But we have to understand the borders and boundaries are in our minds, and they're not concrete. And we can reach beyond them to cooperate. So I think the world problems that we're facing, and there are many, once we get through the pandemic, there are more. The more people we have with this kind of awareness, the more likely we are to find cooperation, collaboration, and being able to work together to solve these problems and meet these challenges. So that's what it means. It's kind of become a catchphrase. I will say, interestingly, one last thing, for those who want to see what the experience is like as in 2 dimensions, you don't need headsets. When I went to Houston to Johnson Space Center to interview astronauts, and 3 of them being on the ISS, I interviewed 7 in a studio, and this triggered a series of other interviews that people did down there. And NASA has a series called Down to Earth. And it's 19 short videos. I'm there in many of them, but you won't see me. You'll just hear the astronauts. And then there's a half hour documentary called Down to Earth, The Astronaut's Perspective. I highly recommend it to everyone. If you want to know what I'm talking about and you don't want to read my book, I really shouldn't say this. You should really read my book. But if you don't want to read the book, that will do it. That half-hour documentary will do it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We will definitely also post that and your book on our website and our information to everybody. And it sounds like technology, like you had mentioned, the commercial space travel, it's at the forefront right now. It almost seems that commercial space travel is in the early years of where air travel was in the early 1900s. We know there's so much potential. Just a quick question. Do you feel that once commercial space travel becomes an everyday occurrence, do you feel that there could be greater peace because of this overview effect and so many people getting to experience it?
I do. I'll say two things quickly, just as examples. So Richard Branson, whom I interviewed for the 3rd edition of my book, is very clear about this. He wants people to have the overview effect. He believes it will change the world. He's an environmentalist. He wants people to be more ecologically aware. He is consciously following the airline model. Certainly, people of means are going to go first, but he intends to democratize space. And he wants people to have that experience, but he doesn't just want to get them on his spacecraft and then say goodbye. He wants to prepare them. He wants them to come back and do good things. There's an organization I'm involved with called Space for Humanity. What they're going to do is it's essentially a competition. They will pay for the flight, and it could be Virgin or some other carrier. But the way you win the competition is, what are you going to do when you come back? What are you going to do with the overview effect? And so, yes, I think it will create a change, and it might be subtle ultimately. You know, we might not even notice there's been this global shift in awareness, or it might be dramatic. I don't know. But I do think, yeah, I think it'll happen. Excuse me. And just as is the case with airline travel today, some people will have the experience and they will not report a dramatic change, although they may experience it. But that's okay. We don't need everybody to become transformed. We just need a few people.
Thank you. Well, that sure is exciting. And we look forward to those days when commercial space travel is an everyday occurrence. And based on that, Houston, I'd like to ask you, I know right now, I don't think UPS has any plans for any space travel as of yet, but I do know that our technology is evolving outside of the airline. And you're a member of the FAA's Drone Advisory Committee, and UPS has also been very active with the UAS. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how UPS plans to integrate the UAVs into our operations, please?
You know, absolutely, and thanks for that, Debbie. And there's one thought I wanted to go back to Frank. I've got that I've seen that space VR through my Oculus Quest, and it's pretty phenomenal. I've actually gone up in a hot weather weather balloon and seen the globe from a whole different perspective. So, just for your information, it's just a lot of fun. But yeah, I know, certainly, Debbie, I had a unique perspective. Back in 2016, I was appointed by Secretary Chow to be one of 35 executives in the country to be part of a certain special advisory committee called the Drone Advisory Committee. And our mission, quite frankly, is to advise the FAA administrator on the UAS integration strategy into our national airspace system. So I'm one of 35 different stakeholders. Stakeholders come from traditional manned aviation, new unmanned systems. You got state and local authorities part of it. So really, everyone who's got skin in the game, having a voice to make recommendations as things evolve. Certainly, we at UPS, where we believe from a public policy perspective, it's really important that we get things that are congruent and harmonized across borders internationally, because you don't want to patchwork different activities and requirements if you're going to be successful in the long haul. So foundationally, that becomes part one. And I remember Michael Herpta, who was the FAA administrator at the time, he's since retired. told us that the key to successful integration of unmanned systems in the national airspace system will be public trust and public acceptance. What will people allow? So this whole concept, for our involvement has been to help lay that foundation, do things that will help promote public trust. And what better way to do that than to leverage this technology for doing good? We talked about delivering what matters most, helping others be successful. So, early on, our involvement really kind of started off in the area of humanitarian relief. We partnered with a very innovative company out of Silicon Valley called Zipline. And Zipline had struck up a very unique partnership with the government of Rwanda. And to basically, if you know anything about Rwanda, it's about the size of Maryland. And twice a year they have significant tsunamis to the rain showers to the point where the roads are impassable. And they were having many women who were dying based on post pregnancy, bleeding after delivering babies and things like that. So Zipline had came up with a solution. What if we had an unmanned system that could take blood plasma to these hospitals? And so we collaborated, the UPS Foundation collaborated with Zipline, made $1 million investment, and to help build out that network. We have to be connected with Gavi. Gavi is the world's largest immunization provider. So we leveraged our relationships with Gavi, with the government of Rwanda, and actually set up the world's first fully autonomous network. And over 5,000 deliveries have been made, since that first flight a couple years ago, and that effort continues to expand. We've since done many partnerships with companies. There's a small company called Horse Fly in Loveland, Ohio. And, we actually partnered with them to do the first delivery in the United States of a package coming off a package car. And in this particular test we did down in Tampa, Florida, the drone goes and delivers to a blueberry farm. The driver goes to another location, and the drone comes in and finds the vehicle. So those are just a couple examples. Secretary Chow started the independent pilot program, which was an advanced UAS integration project. They selected 10 different localities around the country. We had the privilege of partnering in one of those localities out of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, doing some very complex deliveries where we worked on the Wake Med Medical Campus to deliver tissue samples and others through this Matternet drone. And so we've been at the forefront of just really trying to advance the industry and moving things forward. We've since stood up and leveraged our manned aviation experience. The FAA has a lot of confidence in us, and as such, UPS became the country's first fully Part 135 certified drone airline, and it's called UPS Flight Forward. And today we continue to expand as the rules and the foundations continue to build out. So in terms of innovation, most recently, pretty big advancement. The original regulation was what they call Part 107, which allows folks to operate under visual line of sight rules. They've since expanded the rights for drones to fly over people, and they've got some new detect and avoid technology that's come out. And so the golden ticket, if you will be at some point where you're allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight. And once that takes place, you'll really start to see things explode. Until then, you'll see airspace segregated. And this kind of goes back with what Frank was saying. Right now, you got this UTM, which is unmanned traffic management system. You got the ATM, which is the air traffic management system. Then you got the STM, which is space traffic management system. So you got these three different spheres of airspace. And increasingly, as you see the Blue Origin, as you see the Virgins, as you see Elon Musk and SpaceX expand more and more, space activity, it has greater and greater impact, on the national airspace system. And this system is a first come, first serve. And so we got to find a way to work together as these technologies, roll out. But, importantly, going back to your question, the Drone Advisory Committee is very intentional in that ultimately we want to support the FAA administrator and eventually getting these unmanned systems to be fully integrated, flying side by side with manned aviation. Now, I'll say this, we at UPS in the last 3 or 4 years, Debbie, we bought a bunch of airplanes. And when we spend billions of dollars, a multi-billion-dollar investment on multiple aircraft, we don't plan to get rid of those aircraft, in the foreseeable future. So we don't see unmanned systems, eliminating the opportunities for pilots in the future. We see these systems complementing and providing new opportunities. The 747-8s that we have will be around for the next 30 years. We're not going to convert them to get rid of our pilots. So you and I don't have to worry about that piece. But the technology itself is going to benefit. And as I mentioned, as you think about the zip line and other places, some of these drones can go and they can do inventories, they can do inspections, they can go and do some of the dangerous, dirty work that, quite frankly, to make the world a better place. So it's very exciting. I'm very excited about UPS. Innovation is you're an innovation-driven company. We're a customer-focused, people-led, innovation-driven organization. So on the innovation side, it's been very exciting to be part of this. And quite frankly, I've learned a new language. In addition to speaking manned aviation, I speak unmanned aviation as well. So it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Houston. And that's very interesting how technology is evolving. And like you said, it's not a direct competition with manned aviation, but it will support it and also for the greater good. So it's good to see that the healthcare involvement and, like you said, safety is increased and we could reach places that otherwise couldn't be reached. So this is a great advancement. And as you also said, we're working together with space, UAS, aviation, all together for this airspace to come together. So we need to have these partnerships and we need to be able to collaborate. And with that, Frank, as the technology is evolving, what is your opinion? Do you feel that your theory may change at all or could evolve as technology increases and evolves? Or do you feel that your theory is kind of something that's set and the people will grow who experience it rather than the theory itself?
That's a really good question. I think the theory will expand. One insight that I had, and this is the great thing about writing, you think you know what you're going to know when you start writing a book, and then as you write the book, you learn from what you're doing. One thing that became obvious at the beginning was, there's a big difference between being in low Earth orbit and being on the moon, okay? Both of them can be called the overview effect, but when you're in low Earth orbit, the Earth fills your field of vision and the universe is kind of looking at you over the edge of the Earth. You're 200 miles away from the surface. When you go to the moon, you're 240,000 miles away. You see the whole Earth, you begin to see more of the universe, right? It was actually not until I was working on, I guess, the third edition of my book, I realized the astronauts not only see the Earth in a way that none of us have seen it, they see the cosmos in a way none of us have seen it. That really led to writing the Cosmo hypothesis, a new hypothesis. And I went back and I looked at all my interviews and I noticed I had astronauts commenting on their experience of the universe as well as the Earth. So I stripped all of those comments out. They became the basis for Cosmo. And so that's an expansion of the theory. And then the other reality that became clear as I was writing the book, even at the very beginning, is that the overview effect is just one change of awareness that we're going to have. There's probably a continuum in changes of awareness in humanity from the first person who climbed a mountain, to the building of the Eiffel Tower, to the initial airline flights. There's a lot of stuff about balloon flights that people got new insights. But if you go to Mars, or when we go to Mars, standing on the surface of Mars, you will see the Earth as a point of light. On the moon or in low Earth orbit, you still see continents and oceans. But when you're on Mars, you won't see any of that. Um, so space exploration, we see a lot of reasons for it. But one big reason is these continuous shifts in our awareness of who we are and where we are in the universe, right? And so that's an expansion of the theory. And people are always asking me, when people go to Mars, will there be another overview effect experience? And, one of the people involved in the movement, Nick Nielsen, points out humans will never see another planet with the shock that we saw the Earth. We've seen Mars from a distance. Now, when astronauts actually go into orbit around Mars, that'll be different, but we will never ever have the experience of leaving the surface and going into orbit. We'll come to those planets from a distance. So the theory will have to expand to take that into account. Yeah, so I think that's what's going to happen. And of course, that's exciting because it's just like the more space exploration, the more technology, the more I get to write about. So my work will never end. It'll never be done. And there will be others after me who can continue it.
Well, that's a good thing. So we'll be looking for your next book after the Mars, from the Mars overview then. Thank you. And Houston, I wanted to ask you, as we talk about looking ahead and a changing outlook, what do you see in the next 5 years or the next 10 years being some of the challenges and also some of the changes that may be taking place in cargo operations and aviation in general from your extensive experience?
Yeah, so I'll speak from a cargo. First of all, if there's one thing that this pandemic has done, it's accelerated this movement towards e-commerce. And you can see e-commerce really becoming the new norm. We had seen it for quite some time. There's really been a shift in how people purchase goods. And we believe that the pandemic has actually accelerated that. And we certainly see that in this new stay-at-home, work-from-home economy. In fact, as we look, and we've got many people who are working remotely, and we aren't going to be so quick to bring everyone back because what we found is that there's a lot of people that do certain jobs that can actually work remotely from home. And quite frankly, they prefer to do that. They're actually more productive, believe it or not. And so it'll allow us to cut costs in terms of facilities and everything else that we lease and own. So that's one thing that we're certainly mindful of. So this movement of the e-commerce is really going to drive. And so while we've been beneficiaries of e-commerce and everything else on the cargo side and the demand from a PPE perspective and some of the small business activity, which has really grown, from an e-commerce perspective, certainly our passenger friends have not been as fortunate. In fact, if you go back to 2019 on the passenger side, here in the US was probably the most productive year that had over 927 million people flew in 2019, about 2.5 million people a day, in addition to over 58,000 tons of cargo. So, a lot of movement in 2019. Come the pandemic, pretty big dip. I think April of 2020, decrease of 96% of passenger travel. And so that's a pretty big dip to recover from. And the aviation industry has recovered before. Go back to 9/11, you go back to the Great Recession, you go back to any number of other things, that period is typically taken a couple of years or so. That most folks are thinking this recovery is going to be between 3 to 5 years. If you look at some of the Boeing data and other folks, A4A, in fact, the A4A, Airlines for America, which is an industry group, their economic analyst, John Hanlich, who's a Harvard grad, certainly agrees with that time frame in terms of when we see things coming back. So there's definitely going to be back, which means there's going to be great jobs in the future. In fact, Boeing projects that over the next 20 years, over 43,000 aircraft deliveries. And so that's a lot of jets. That equates to about a 3.2% growth in the overall fleet, and which is going to equate to about 2 million jobs. So one thing we know about the aviation area is there's this tremendous opportunity in aerospace, whether it's being a pilot or being a mechanic or being a aerospace engineer. any number of supporting activities, manufacturing that makes this industry grow, there's going to be lots of opportunity. And that's not even speaking to the unmanned piece, which we know from an innovation side is on the horizon as well. And so, the outlook is very bright, I think, for the future right now. It's survival. There's a lot of cash burn going on, particularly on the passenger side. We are very fortunate on the cargo side, logistically, to be in position to really be here to support the world, but also take advantage of this shift in behavior from consumers on the e-commerce, small business side. And now that we have an aging population as well, the baby boomers, are here in force. We used to be the largest U.S. generation, now only second to the millennials. Certainly you're getting older, so the need for healthcare and everything else is growing as well. So very optimistic, not only on the cargo side, but in the long haul for our passenger counterparts as well. Boeing and others believe that about 3 years or so to fully recover and get back on path. And certainly just given the growth of the populations around the world, I know for my family, we can't wait to get the vaccine and get out of our house and travel. And so we'll be on those cruises, we'll be on the planes. And I know there's many, many others like us that are looking forward to a return. So I think the future of aviation is very bright. Certainly there are a couple of things out there from a technology side that still need to be under consideration. We've got the next gen from just moving things about, next gen technology, air traffic controlling. Those are certainly a couple of things that have to be. We got a lot of infrastructure, so there's a lot of policy that's needed, just nationally and I would say internationally as well. The reduction in the passenger traffic has led to a reduction in revenues for infrastructure around the world. And so there's going to be some, and we're talking about an infrastructure that already needed a lot of investments. And so in order for us to maintain the proper safety protocols and really be prepared for this future growth, we're going to go back to this infrastructure policy, not only in the United States, but around the world, to make sure that governments are making those right investments so that we can prepare, for this future growth. Aviation as a whole, drives about 6% of the world's GDP. And so many jobs, many great opportunities associated with aviation that all of us should be motivated to be part of, and certainly encourage and advocate for policies that are going to create the infrastructure that allows for future success.
For the aviation and aerospace industry in general. So this is all really good news. And Frank, based on that, I would like to ask you if you have some words of advice or some kind of information that you can give to some people who may be interested in going into following up with your work and carrying it on and possibly expanding on that work in decades to come. How can they get started, or what advice would you have for them?
Well, I would answer that on two levels. One is obviously, if somebody is specifically interested in the work that I'm doing, which is the bringing the overview effect down to earth, they could get in touch through you perhaps, or a mayor, or the association, and you could let me know. I'd be happy to correspond with people and let them know how to do that. One thing I would say is, if they're interested, find a way in. I've said this before in giving talks to young people. I had no credentials. I had no right. I had no, reputation to become the expert on the overview effect. I just did it. And I went through a long period of thinking that my book was a total failure, that it hadn't spurred the revolution in thinking that I wanted it to, and I never actually gave up on it. And now, it's working. So my first advice would be, just don't wait till you have the credentials, just find a way in, and don't give up. That would be my number one point. But beyond that, I was thinking, as listening to Houston, I mean, 1903, a couple of guys who had a bicycle shop didn't give up, and they were told, you know, heavier than air flight is totally impossible. Don't even try. Get a job. Go do something useful. You know, all of us are riding on the backs of the Wright brothers today. All of us, really, in this field. If you think about from 1903, which I believe is the first flight, you all know better than I do if that's right. But if you think about what Houston was saying and all the people flying and all the cargo being shipped and all of that, now consider expanding that realm to the solar system. In 150 years, I fully believe that we will see human beings living, working, doing everything people do in just a much larger space, you know, and it's going to be ordinary. It's going to be part of life, as miraculous as it will be. And so one thing I would say is take a look at the new space industry, as we call it. SpaceX is hiring people. You know, Blue Origin is hiring people. There are these, and behind that, there are all these new space startups. Venture capital is pouring into the industry. You know, aerospace, the space part of aerospace, it's not the Apollo era where it was all NASA. It's not even, I don't know, 10 years ago, because we now have entrepreneurs moving into this field. And they, to be honest, they are moving faster than the government agencies. I mean, NASA has wisely realized we should partner with these guys. We can't really compete. Elon Musk is really smart and we should help him, and he can build things for us that will work. If you watch a SpaceX launch and you look at their mission control, most of the people there, the oldest ones are in their 30s, you know. It's a bunch of young people flying rocket ships and doing a great job of it. So in addition to that, once again, if you imagine people living off of the planet permanently, we're going to need everybody, not just scientists, not just pilots, not just engineers. We're going to need everybody who has a skill participating in that. So I would certainly welcome anybody to get into the sort of philosophical consciousness part, but if that's not your cup of tea, if you're a action-oriented person, you want to go do things, you know, I've said before, we're moving from playing a finite game on planet Earth to playing an infinite game. What's out there is essentially infinite. And the limit is really to what we aspire to do. So I'd really encourage people who are interested in any of this to not just dream about it, but think, you know, how do I get into it? And it could be a great future for people who have that inclination.
Like you said, passion, follow your dreams. And if you don't know how to get into it, find a way and you'll make it happen. So I thank you for those words. It's very inspiring. And I think we have probably a lot of space potential of people who aren't even born yet, and also people who are coming up through the ranks right now. So it's very exciting. Houston, based on that last question, I'd like to ask you from the aviation point of view and also air cargo with UAS, what are some words of wisdom or something, that advice that you could give to inspire people who might be thinking about this type of career for the next 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road?
Well, thank you, Debbie. I think, you know, like Frank, I just believe that, you know, they always say this cliche that the sky is the limit, and you know, this truly is a limitless industry, if you will. You think about not only what's the present, but where the future is going. What might seem impossible today, as Frank said, will be possible tomorrow. And so I think the human spirit is such that we want to innovate. We want to explore. I mean, I think that's part of our DNA. So certainly for folks interested in those type of things, being excited about what the future might bring about, be part of this industry, being part of creating something that doesn't exist today, creating new opportunities, opening up new markets. I mean, that's really what this industry allows to do. And I would say this, it's one thing I learned that I've always appreciated as an African American male, and flying F-18s. And it's one thing I always loved about aviation is aviation doesn't care what the color of your skin is, it doesn't care what your gender is, it doesn't care what your sexual orientation is, it doesn't care what your political party is. It just wants to know if you know your stuff, right? You got to be prepared to be success. So this industry is performance driven. And so I think, emphasizing to young people in particular, the STEM skills, those things that allow folks to perform and to be prepared, because these jobs are great paying jobs. As I talk to young people, I talk to them and say, hey, who wants to own their own car? Who wants to buy their own house? Who wants to be able to send their kids to college? Well, this industry, allows for you to do those things. It allows you to dream big and to accomplish those dreams. And it's phenomenal just how limitless. But it all starts with a foundation of preparation. And so I'm a very big advocate on mentoring young people, on paying it forward. Having be a previous national chair of the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. We do a lot of mentoring across the country on their board of advisors now. Big Brothers Big Sisters, Women in Aviation. And if you look at this industry, unfortunately, it's primarily Caucasian. It just is. And so I really feel an obligation to make sure that we don't leave a full generation of people behind. And so I think we need the help of many to bring people in, to spread the message, to connect to organizations, to spread the word, to be an example, in word or through financial support, in order to make sure that that next generation, that the next group of people, part of this humanity, are participating and not left behind. And so, from my perspective, from a leadership perspective, that's something that's very important to me. I know from a UPS perspective, as I mentioned, we've got over 500,000 UPSers around the world. If there's one thing our service drivers, providers see, they operate in and out of every community around the world each and every day. So they see the good, they see the bad, they see the ugly, they see the poverty, they see the need. And so we're very committed to advancing our world forward by ensuring that everyone has that chance. So, and I'm really excited about aviation because kind of what Frank was saying, you get outside the world, you get to see humanity from a different perspective. Aviation allows you to see different perspectives. In my travels throughout my career, traveling to different countries, third world countries, etc. I say people think they know poverty in the U.S. They have no idea what poverty looks like until they go somewhere where folks are living on $2 a month, for resources. And so this aviation area industry has the opportunity to not only bring people together, but to advance society as well, and not leave anybody behind. So all those things, I think, are reasons for people to be excited about our future. And certainly is something that motivates me to continue to do everything possible to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one reason we're all here together today as part of the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Association, part of UPS, and looking out as part of the greater good of all of humanity. Thanks to Frank and your overview effect also. Before we turn it over to the Q&A from our audience, is there any last closing thoughts that you would like to give in general? And then we'll get started with Sergey and the Q&A session.
I'd like to add to what Houston said. I think it's really critical, and Mar and I have talked about this. I think it's really critical that as humanity moves off the planet, that the planet not be left behind. The way I like to put it is I believe some of us need to leave the planet without leaving it behind. And also that we not exacerbate existing inequities and inequalities. So I have co-founded a nonprofit called the Human Space Program. And our mission is to ensure an inclusive, sustainable, and ethical evolution into the solar ecosystem of humanity. It's not an easy job. It's just like it's not an easy job on Earth to leave nobody behind. But if we don't do that, we're going to miss an enormous opportunity, and we're going to have to go back and repair it later. Just getting to Mars is not going to solve all our problems on Earth. I mean, we need a plan. So our purpose in the Human Space Program is to create a comprehensive plan for human evolution into the solar system. I say on Earth, we have planners and developers, and you need both. You need planners, you need developers. Without the developers, you don't get anything done. Without the planners, there's no sort of criteria for how it gets done. So we're concerned there might be too many developers right now in space exploration, and we need a few more planners. And so we're gonna try to fill that void. And part of what we're looking at is the whole issue of inclusion and making sure that it not become the province of a few elites that are already ahead in life, and that we just continue that process. We want to avoid that mistake.
Thank you, Frank. It sounds like your organization has an amazing mission and very important also to carry forward. Thank you. Houston, do you have any last thoughts before we turn over to the Q&A?
No, I just, very interesting discussion. I'm very honored to participate. I was learning a lot from Frank just listening. So I've been like I'm in the audience as well, just very excited to learn about what the future looks like. So, excited to be part of this process.
Great. Well, thank you. And I'm sure we have some very interesting questions coming from our Q&A. So at this point, I would like to turn the moderation over to my colleague Sergey for the Q&A session, which he will take from the audience. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to participate in such interesting event, not to say in such great organization. So first question was to Frank, very rhetoric question. Does the notion of need to live on another planet discounts the value of preserving the habitat of the biosphere on the altar, on the Earth?
No, that's an important distinction to make. Thank you for that question. I insist on saying moving into the rest of the solar system. The Earth is part of the solar system, so we don't want to have a dichotomy. And the plan I'm talking about will include the Earth, making the Earth a better place. I have not talked to any astronaut when I say, what did you get out of your experience as an astronaut? I haven't talked to one of them who said, what I learned was we got to get off this planet and leave it behind. No. They all come away from it with a greater appreciation of the Earth. And
yeah.
Akihiko Aki Hoshide, who's a Japanese astronaut, said something to the effect of, when I asked him this, he said, without the Earth, we are not going to get anywhere. If the Earth is in chaos and is not a stable starting point, space exploration is not going to work out. So as a reality and as a moral and ethical issue, no, that can't be the answer. And, Jeff Bezos is taking $1 billion out of Amazon and putting it into his space company, Blue Origin. And his whole plan, which is too much to get into right now, but his whole plan totally includes the Earth. And he says, this is the best planet. The Earth, we got the best planet. We've been to the other planets. This is the best one. So his whole plan includes the Earth, and I think that is the way it's got to be.
Thank you, Frank. Absolutely. There is another very interesting and refreshing question. What are your views on UFOs? Did you ask the astronauts about any encounters?
What was it? Did I ask him about what?
UFOs, undefined objects?
UFOs. Well, that's two different questions. What are my views on UFOs, and did I ask astronauts? The second one is easy. No, I didn't ask them about UFOs. In many cases, the question of whether extraterrestrial intelligent life exists just came up spontaneously. Yeah, and I think most of the astronauts I talked to feel pretty strongly that there is some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence out there. I don't know that that's directly because of their experience, or if it's just because they're highly aware of the fact there are billions of stars and billions of galaxies and billions of planets, as Carl Sagan used to say.
So they didn't share any facts.
Sorry?
Astronauts did not share any facts with you.
No. They, you know, and they did not bring up UFOs at all. You know, I do think UFOs are very, very interesting. You know, going back to aerospace, UFOs are unidentified flying objects, and that's a very good term. That doesn't say what they are, but they are in our airspace. And I think at this point, the Pentagon, for example, is beginning to say they are some real entity. They're not someone's imagination. And they've published some videos by pilots. Houston, I don't know if you've seen those, Deborah, of pilots encountering UFOs and really not knowing what they were. And so I think what's going on right now is there's much more openness to trying to scientifically understand what UFOs are. But I think one of the big mistakes, and I'll just close with this, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is over here. It's about aliens, if you will. But when we kind of, what's the word? When we kind of merge that with UFOs and assume that's a form of extraterrestrial intelligence, we're making a leap that's not, it's not validated by anything. So it's really two separate areas of examination. I could go on and all night about this, but it's not really our topic.
Okay, next question is also factual. When can we expect to put the first human on Mars?
Well, I think NASA is talking about in the 2030 timeframe. Actually, Elon Musk is talking about much sooner. I mean, he's talking about a non-crewed launch of his Starship to Mars in the next few years. He's talking about putting humans on Mars within a decade, and I think he would probably say sooner. And Elon Musk has done a lot of things, again, that people said, well, I don't think you can do that. So, I mean, I think somewhere between, I would say somewhere between now and 2035, there will be a human being on Mars. Maybe sooner. Oh, you know, one joke that's out there is that Mars is already inhabited. It's inhabited by robots. We have robots all over Mars right now. Yeah, robots are all over this planet, but humans will only follow, you know?
Yes, yes, you're right. There is a practical question. The space industry, it's from Fernando Bruno. The space industry frequently facilitated the advancements in the medical field. So I perceive them as contributing fields. Would you have recommendations on health-related research and public health areas that could be pursued within NASA and other space companies?
Hmm. Yeah, you know, that's a really interesting question. One of the
Yeah.
things, I wrote an article in which I interviewed an astronaut who was a medical doctor. And he talked about how when you're on the International Space Station, you can't put an MRI up there. It's too big, it's too heavy. You can't really do a CT scan. And so they've had to adapt to using far less invasive and less weighty equipment. And there's a lot of medical experiments going on actually on the International Space Station right now. They're actually doing experiments on cancer cells. I don't know why this hasn't gotten more attention, but apparently cancer cells die rather quickly in space, which is it's very promising research. So, by figuring out how astronauts with minimal equipment can do medicine, and also by actually running experiments on the ISS, we are really, really learning a lot. The other thing we're learning a lot about is the challenges to human long-term habitation in outer space. One of the biggest problems, other than radiation, is weightlessness. The astronauts love being weightless. They can just zip around. They can hang upside down. There's no up or down. And they like it, but their bodies are going through incredible changes when they're in a weightless environment. Your heart starts beating much more slowly. You lose calcium from your bones. They have to exercise 2 hours a day just to be able to come back to Earth. I don't know if you've noticed when they land, they get lifted out of the capsule because they can't walk, because they've been in zero gravity for so long. And so I think we're gonna have to figure out how to do artificial gravity if we're going to have long-term human habitation out there.
Okay, thank you. What is your view on Space Force? I understand military application.
I want Houston to help me out here. I can't do all the questions. Houston, you're a military person. I know aviation is your thing other than space, but do you have thoughts on Space Force?
Well, obviously it's now an official branch of the military. So it's one of those new forces that certainly it'll be interesting as that mission evolves. I don't know a lot about it itself, but certainly the opportunity to be prepared, right? So what's really Space Force all about is about ensuring that we've got another arm as folks look to go out in space, to make sure we've got folks out there that have a defensive presence. As much as we like to think that everyone will have goodwill, there's obviously always bad actors and everything else. So it's like anything else, ensuring that our interests are protected. While trying to advance humanity, you also have to have a defensive capability. Increasingly, as 5G networks and others roll out, we become more and more dependent, on satellites and other things for our everyday living. Our ability to protect the things that are important to us, American interests and other interests as well, becomes increasingly important. So, I suspect that the whole thought process is to kind of build this out and see where it goes. Certainly it's another opportunity to fly something cool. I know if I had the opportunity to go back and fly the F-22 or the F-35, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I'm a little too old now, but if I had a chance to go and fly the next jet that's going to take me to outer space, I'd sign up for that as well. So certainly exciting times. And from a military perspective, I think what it will promote is the next generation of young people excited to serve the country, excited to go out there and risk their lives to advance interests, of others. And I think that's what service is all about anyway, that the willingness to sacrifice, to put others before self. And as you mentioned earlier, Frank, in the Challenger event and others, these folks that put themselves in these very exciting positions are also doing so at great risk. And so it's a unique type of person who, has it in their DNA. But fortunately for us, we've got a lot of folks like that.
I have a question, Houston. Actually, you mentioned something very important about UPS drones. And this is of great interest to us at the organization, also at the company that I'm running right now. So as you know, the drones that we're dealing with today are in between passive and procreative. So basically passive, the human being tells the drone what to do, and the procreative is basically human being, they share goals and constraints with the drone. And the drone originate and produce. My questions to you, what are the next steps in making the drone more intuitive? And I believe this is something that all of us are moving in, in the next probably, in the next couple of decades. I see that the drones are becoming more intuitive. And just to give you an example, this is when the human being share a challenge with the drone, and the drone feel and sense to create an actual solution for that particular problem or problem statement on the spot. So is this something UPS doing right now from a research perspective in making the drones intuitive?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And as you think about two different things, right? You talk about unmanned aerial systems, and then you have fully autonomous aerial systems. And certainly that fully autonomous systems, there's a lot of machine learning, a lot of AI, artificial intelligence that are going to be involved in that. And so we see a progression, obviously, if you go from a policy perspective and from a regulated perspective. There's one thing that we say in the world of safety is not all safety is the same. You're allowed to be different, but you have to have at least an equivalent level of safety. And so if you think about unmanned systems, particularly those that don't have any human interaction, the rules are being built are going to have to be built, with decision-making processes, with algorithms and others that allow them to duplicate to ensure equivalent levels of safety. Because in order to have, unmanned systems flying in shared airspace with people, the thought process of those vehicles have to be such, the rules have to be such that they can ensure, separation, that they can ensure, safety over the public. And so there's many who say that, and the importance of 5G becomes, even greater, because the amount of processing power needed to develop, that type of data flow, if you will, real time, in order to make those type of dynamic decisions are going to be at a very high level. And so that's why it's exciting. And that's why I think from a graduated perspective, you'll see things happen in very isolated, segregated type of airspace where the risk to run into other things aren't there. But as the data and as the technology improves, you'll start to see more and more advancement in other areas as well. But absolutely, machine learning, AI are absolutely the foundation, I think, to fully autonomous operations. And from a UPS perspective, in order for us to scale, now I can't have one pilot operating one UAS. In order for us to make business sense out of it, I need to be able to operate, multiple drones off that package delivery car. I need to be able to electronically give them signals to go out and do their things to help my driver and to autonomously navigate their way back to me. And so once we get to that type of scalability, then there's going to be a tremendous growth opportunity here. But that's really, probably the next step is how do you scale this? And the only way you scale it, you can't scale it if humans are connected. You have to scale it through AI, through machine learning, to the ability to operate autonomously.
And also, Houston, just one last question. I know drones are going to pick up momentum soon and change the way we live. Are there any plans within UPS to outsource the capabilities right now of the drones to individuals as independent contractors to create jobs, of course, outside the UPS ecosystem?
Yeah, so a company like UPS, so we aren't a manufacturer. So, what we do is we look to manufacturers to help us solve for, business opportunities, if you will. So, everything that we've done so far has been in collaborations with very creative, innovative companies that come in and help us solve for, solutions that our customers are asking for. So we see a lot of partnerships. We see a lot of collaboration. There's certain companies that have gone on to do their own manufacturing, but for us, because we're involved in so many other activities, we'll continue to leverage. When we go out and buy a Boeing 747 or 757 or an A300 or an MD-11, we're spending billions of dollars on those aircraft, but we certainly aren't going to develop them ourselves. It'll be the same way with this advanced technology. We'll go out there, we'll purchase, technology that'll help align with our business goals and help serve our customers in the future.
Thank you. And back to Frank. Eric Meager argues with Frank. He writes, it seems to me that there is a bubble in space investment going on now, similar to the surge in 86 and the Leoset bubble of the late 90s. When the inevitable correction happens, do you think the space industry will be set back for a decade or more again?
Good question. I actually have thought about this a lot. I would compare it in my experience to the dot-com bubble. I was in fact involved in public relations for computer companies back in the day. And, it was crazy. I mean, there were companies getting investment that never turned a profit and didn't know how they were going to turn a profit. And yet there was this irrational exuberance, I believe it was called by one of the experts in the day. Yeah, and what happened was, I think that the computer industry actually wasn't set back. One of the important things that happened was the internet, which I think gave new life to the entire business. But I do agree. I think what will happen is that in a similar fashion, the strong will survive and many of the companies won't. And I think that's just, typical, very disruptive, innovative situation. But I think the space industry is just inevitable, its growth. I could be wrong, and I might regret saying that, but I just think it's going to happen. I think what would be more detrimental to the industry is conditions on the Earth. If it's not so much focused on the space industry, but just our civilization as a whole is somewhat fragile the way it's put together. And if we can't keep it functioning, that could be detrimental to the space industry. And, it's interesting. The pandemic has not been helpful to the smaller space companies, but overall, during the pandemic, last year was a very active year in space. Again, a very successful public-private partnership with 2 Dragon spacecraft going to the International Space Station. Those were produced by SpaceX under contract to NASA. And, that was a huge milestone this year. So that's just one of many, many events that occurred this year. So I'm pretty confident it'll keep going. And I agree, there is a bubble. but I think that's just part of private enterprise and the way it works.
Thank you. It was last question, I guess, but there is a suggestion. I'd be happy also from Eric Meager. I'd be happy to share the experience some of us here had in commercial space while in business school in the 80s and why it is different today. This pick up on what Frank was saying. I don't know, can we go get the floor to Eric or not? To share his experience in commercial space? Maybe not. Okay, then
Just about out of time to wrap up our session here, but we want to thank Eric for his question, and we could possibly continue via email if he had to follow up with him. And I think we're finishing up with the Q&A session. Did you say, is there any other additional questions that have come through, or that was the end of the question session?
it was the last one.
Okay, thank you very much. And on behalf of the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Association, I would like to thank both Frank and Houston for your time, your insight, your valuable information. I know we all gained a lot from this event tonight, and it has been recorded. We will be sharing that via our LinkedIn site and also via email and other means. And Mayor, do you have any closing words for everybody?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Deborah. I'd like to thank Houston. Really, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. We look forward to working with you in the near future on a lot of subjects, in particular the drones. So this is a sexy subject for all of us. So definitely we want to take it further. And also to Frank, really thank you for being with us. I know we started our discussion 4 years ago, I believe. It's been longer than 4 years. So we're quite, I'm very happy to see you here at this session, and I look forward to working with you in the near future as well. Thank you for the attendees. I see that some of them are exiting right now. Thank you all, and we're going to bring you a beautiful program moving forward for fiscal year 2021. We will keep you posted on the LinkedIn group. But in the meantime, Deborah will be in touch with you, hopefully in the next couple of days, on some sort of event that's going to take place next month as well. Thank you all. Have a nice evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all. Right.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Nice to meet everyone.
Good to meet everybody. Thank you. Bye.